Welcome to episode 1 of Boss by Bronte. This first episode is designed to give you some insight into me as an expert in this space, but also just a chance to get to know me a little bit. If you're just here for the value episodes, you can feel free to skip this one, or if you're here to hang out, I'm excited to share a little bit of my journey with you. So life for me right now looks like working from home in my training and coaching business Dash Academy with my fiance Alex and our little Cavalier Peach in Maroochydore on the Sunshine Coast. But I'm going to take you right back to where my career actually started. Normally when I tell my story or give my career background, I start when I was working in a marketing agency. But in reality, before that was one of the most impactful and significant stages of my career, even looking back now. So when I was at uni, I was studying a Bachelor of Public Relations, minoring in journalism, and I was also working 3 jobs at the time. So I was studying full-time and basically working full-time. I had a job at a retail store, I was working for an events company, and I was also a club promoter, which was so much fun and definitely was sort of the social aspect to my life because with everything I had going on, I barely had time to hang out with a single person. So it was really nice to have that sort of balance. And basically, I was working in a team under a guy who had so much experience. He was incredibly talented at what he does, and he had all the contacts in the industry and had actually run festivals before. So our whole promo team was just sort of run by him and directed by him, and we were just essentially posting about the events that were coming up on our social media platform. That was pretty much our role and what we were hired to do. But I recognized that in this position that he was in, I could learn a lot from him that would be relevant to my degree and to my industry that I wanted to get into, which was obviously marketing and media. So as much as I could support him and help him out and get involved in other aspects of this role, I was putting my hand up to do as much as I possibly could with any spare time that I had, which wasn't a lot, but I still was trying to get involved just anywhere that I could possibly, do extra work or get extra experience or get extra insight. And this really worked to my favor more so than I could have predicted at the time, because at some stage, about 6 months after the club had launched and we were, doing all the work, it was a highly successful club. I actually got a call from the venue manager who asked me to come in for an urgent meeting, and she explained that the guy that was running everything for us in the club had actually been fired and had to leave his position. So there was some incident that happened and I wasn't there, and he had to step down from the role. And she offered me the position, and I literally almost laughed at her because this role was to run a team of about 15 promoters, to book all of the artists, book all of the local acts, organize all of their rider and their accommodation, their transfers. It was to be artist liaison. It was a really, really big role and something I had absolutely no experience in. So when she offered it to me, I literally said all of that. I was like, there is 0 chance that I can do this position. I'm 19. I'm still at uni full time. I have 2 other jobs. Like, what are you talking about? And it was then I think she kind of confessed. She was like, okay, I hear you. Like, I'm actually aware of all of that, but you are the only option we have. Because I had been shadowing the guy that was running it all, she was like, we've seen that you've shadowed him. We know that you don't know what you're doing, but you know the tiniest bit more than anyone else. So you're going to have to, step in if you want this position. And I don't know why. I felt like because she knew that I was inexperienced and she knew that I didn't know what I was doing, that it kind of just gave me a little bit of confidence to be like, okay, well, I guess I have some sort of free reign. Like I can just make decisions here and I can just run with this in whatever feels right. And if it doesn't work out, well, we all went into it knowing that it probably wouldn't go very well, but here we are. So I got that position and I, quit my other 2 jobs, and I really decided to just go in at it and see what I could do with this role, because like I said, it was really aligned to what I was studying at uni, but also there was just a really fun aspect to it. It was, going to VIP rooms all the time and hanging out with major artists and going backstage festivals, and it was a really fun position to do while you're at uni. It was sort of the dream uni role. So I got into it, and as much as there was that really fun aspect to the industry, there was also a very big serious side to it that was very, very relationship focused. And really quickly, I understood that this industry was very male dominated and very ego driven. And I couldn't just kind of come in as the fresh faced young girl who had no experience and expect anyone in those other, bigger positions to respect me at all. I really, really had to prove myself. And When I started getting emails and calls from managers of major artists, I kind of realized that there was this underlying, I don't know, like condescending tone to me. And I realized that they had actually sort of discussed the industry was not very big. And they had definitely discussed that there was a young, inexperienced girl that had a massive budget to play with. And that, they could sort of all come at me from different angles and try to get me to book their artists at completely unreasonable rates. So super quickly, I was faced with this sort of position where I could either roll over, I guess, in a way and just be like the nice girl who was like trying to keep all of these relationships good and saying yes to everything and, being really friendly to all the managers. Or I could establish myself as someone to respect and take seriously and really push back on them and sort of go hard and build relationships in that way. And looking at the industry, I realized that that was 100% going to be the way to do it. They actually didn't respect people that sort of sucked up and just played the nice guy. They really needed people that was sort of hard hitting and fact players and that could push back and had a backbone and really showed up in that way. And I recognized that in terms of the power play, they needed me almost more than I needed them. This was one of the biggest clubs in Australia at the time. And it was definitely sought after for any international acts touring Australia. And that's who these managers were representing. So I really quickly sort of established that I had a bit of power here too. As much as they were bringing me some great acts, I definitely had something that they wanted as well. So I pushed back on quite a few of them, but there was one main guy that I knew was sort of the ringleader of this tone, that I was someone who could be, taken advantage of in a way. And he was the main one that I knew if I could get him to respect me, he very quickly would tell others that, I wasn't someone to play with. So he sent me an act and had a price tag that was ridiculous on it. I literally looked at it and was like, there is zero chance this artist is worth that. And I think that to this day, I honestly think he was just testing me. I think that was his test act to see how little I knew and how much he could just tell me this was a great act to book and that it would book out the club and that that's someone I should have through. So I spent way too long. I spent hours and hours and hours going back through every single email that I could on this booking inbox to find every communication that I could to kind of equip myself with what I needed to go back at this properly and professionally and to define myself as someone to respect. It was genuinely something that I had to like completely curate, because I knew I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, if they know that, then, I might as well not be in this position. I'm never going to be able to achieve anything with them. So I went back through and I thought about sending this guy an email and just saying, hey, this is a fair quote. This is actually what I think, we should be booking this artist for. But I was like, okay, what's going to be more powerful than an email is a phone call, because it shows that I'm not scared of him. I'm not intimidated by him. Keeping in mind, this was someone in Australia that was booking and managing like the biggest acts, like every major artist that you would have known at the time were on his book. So he was like a very, very big player. But I was like, this is my moment. I only get one of them. I either, roll over or I set the tone here. So I called him out of the blue. I didn't let him know that I was calling. And I had my dot points in front of me, which obviously I was trying to keep as casual as possible. And I was just like, hey, got your offer through. I'm actually going to come back at you with basically 50% of what he'd offered. And I was like, this is based on, we booked the same artist 12 months ago at this price. They haven't released any albums. They haven't done any tours or any collaborations. I think this is fair. I'm going to include accommodation for you. Are you happy to roll with that? And I just tried to be as direct as I possibly could. On the other end, he sort of like went to say something, paused for a second, was silent for a second, and then he's like, oh, I'll come back to you in a minute. I'm just going to talk to the manager. And then later that day, he emailed me, confirmed the booking, and that was it. And it honestly, that was the only moment that I needed to have. All the other artists management that were sending me really unfair quotes and trying to harass me with phone calls, that all basically stopped that day. And I knew that he had told people that, okay, never mind guys, it's not, a young girl up there who's just playing around with all this money. It's someone who's actually taking this role really seriously. And I actually ended up becoming really good friends with pretty much all of the artist managers from that day. They used to come up with the artists for the tours and we used to all go out to dinner and things like that. And I honestly do not think that that would have happened. And I do not think that we would have had any sort of success either for the club or for myself had I not taken that moment really, really seriously and understood the impact of, taking that risk and really, really pushing myself forward and sort of setting the tone of who I was and who I wanted to be perceived as. The other thing that I really got from this position was learning the power of organic social media. And this is what actually sparked my love for socials, is because I pretty much was just given a budget and told to fill the club. That was basically the brief. Everything else was up to me. So I tapped into organic posting, and I really quickly sort of figured out that, posting at a certain time got me X amount of results. And if I posted this type of picture, it performed better than this type of picture. And I started a document where I was just like dot pointing everything that was working and dot pointing underneath that everything that wasn't working. And of course, I had no idea this was a social media strategy. I was literally just, writing down what I could see happening. I wasn't even studying social media. I wasn't even offered at the university at the time. This was definitely pre-people tapping into the power of it properly. It was definitely emerging. People were definitely aware that it was powerful, but no one had really defined exactly how to use it in a powerful way for their brand. So I was, taking notes on all of that. The other thing that I was doing was working with our promoters and writing them basically scripts and basically times, posts, everything else of what they should be posting on their accounts, which when I look back, I realize is essentially just influencer-based marketing. I now put briefs together for influencers, and it really matches exactly what I was putting together for my promoters at the time. I was like, this works really well. Do this, mention this, add these dot points. So it's really funny how even back then, what I do now, it's really, really similar. It's just obviously that social media space has evolved a lot. So it's a little bit more in depth and a little bit more complex and strategic, but the base of it is still the exact same. So from the work that I was doing on those social media pages, as well as everything else in the marketing space and with the artists, that club actually had the best 3 years that it had ever had while I was there. And then I ended up packing up and leaving when I finished my degrees. So when I think of my career, I really do think that this position shaped so much of who I am as a person in business today. It really did teach me a lot about negotiation and being respectful, but also, earning and demanding respect in a lot of ways as well. Showing up for the person that you want to be perceived and seen as is so, so crucial. You cannot not respect yourself but expect others to. It just does not work like that. And this showed that to me so, blatantly and so in my face that it's something that I've carried through every decision and everything that I've done in my career since. Also showing me the power of organic social media and sparking my love for that is what then led me down the path of, going more heavily into marketing than media, even though that was my degree. I really, really enjoyed the social media space and understanding the power of content and connecting and building a community. So from there, I ended up graduating my degree. So I left the club to go and get a role in a marketing agency. So I got this position straight out of uni, which was really exciting in itself because it was one of the only marketing agencies in the area at the time that I really, really wanted to work for. They'd done some really cool campaigns, worked with some amazing brands. And essentially, I just wanted to be part of it. So I did a free internship with them, which they turned me down for multiple times. But I was like, I'm going to do free work for you. Show me what you need. Show me where I can support. Let me in, basically. And from there, I was actually given a role and promoted a couple of times over the following 12 months. I was there for a year, learned a lot about the marketing space and about the way agencies were run and about clients and, campaigns and everything else in the space. But I did also recognize that there just wasn't an emphasis on the organic social media. And because that's what I had done at the club and that's what I got so much success with and had so much fun sort of defining really strong strategies with, I wanted to push more heavily into that. And I think brands at this stage were starting to understand a little bit more the power of content marketing and were starting to understand a little bit more how impactful it could be if you did it right and you really aimed on connecting with your audience and showcasing your brand messaging. So I ended up leaving that agency. I quit and everyone told me not to quit. Everyone was like, why would you quit? You got a position in your industry straight out of uni. Like, it makes no sense to quit. But I just had this overwhelming feeling that this wasn't the right place for me to be anyway. And if I was going to quit at some stage, it didn't really make a difference if it was then or if it was in another 12 months' time. I'd already got the experience. I'd already soaked up as much information as I felt like I could, because I had this in the back of my mind that I did want to leave. I was like, well, I'm just going to leave now and start to, make some steps for my career that's moving in the right direction, because I kind of just knew that it wasn't it. So I quit the position and I gave myself 6 months. I literally remember I was like, okay, 6 months it. If I can do nothing in 6 months' time and I'm completely failing, then that is totally fine. I will just get another job in 6 months. I realized it literally made no difference if I was looking for a job right then when I'd quit or whether I was going to be looking for a job in 6 months' time. So I was like, I'm just going to play this out, quit. If I need to dip into my savings, then I'm just going to do that, and it will be worth it for me to have given something a go. So I decided to launch a little tiny baby freelance business from my kitchen table. And this is where I was, working from home. I named it She the Social, which I still love the name. I still love the logo. And I actually sold my car to fund the initial phases of this. I think it was like $5,000 or something. But that was what I really had to be like, okay, cool. This has to sustain me for 6 months and any investments into the business. And once that money runs out, well, I'm going to be looking for a job, and that's fine. And honestly, I don't know why that didn't feel scarier at the time, but I think once you've had enough moments just kind of work out for you, you kind of get used to the idea of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and then just trusting yourself. It's not even so much about, trusting the universe and trusting that things will play out well. I think it's literally about trusting yourself and knowing that whatever issues come up or whatever challenges, that you will make the right decisions to sort of navigate that. So putting yourself in those positions doesn't feel as scary. So I was at my kitchen table. I literally got 2 clients basically from the get-go. I was really heavily focusing on the organic social media side of things. So really just posting, and a lot of brands weren't doing that. A lot of them were really focusing on the paid ads and, the bigger media campaigns. So what I was coming into the industry with was a little bit different, and it did make it easier for me to get those initial clients. The first one that I got from posting on social media. I posted a horrific video in a Facebook group that was just the worst lighting in the world and the most terrible script. But straight off the back of that, I did get someone reach out and I got them as a client. And then the other one was, I think, a friend of a friend. So I was like, cool, I'm so successful. I have my 2 clients that were paying me like $400 a month. And I was like, this is great. This is exactly why I quit. I know that it was very small, budgeted clients, but it did still feel just crazy to have anyone paying me for what I was doing for them and paying me directly and, calling myself a business owner. And I loved that sort of phase in my business where every single thing that happened was just so overwhelmingly exciting, but also really scary in a lot of ways as well, because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I was really just focusing on trying to get clients and trying to get more eyes on my brand. And, I was running competitions and I was posting in groups as frequently as I could. And I did start to get a few more on my books. I think I ended up with maybe 4 to 6 clients that were all paying, next to nothing. I think they were all on like $400 packages, which even that, me charging that felt big. I was like, $400. They're going to hand me $400 to manage their accounts. Like, that is crazy. And I ended up hiring a support person 6 months into that as well. So she was only on 4 hours a week, but she was my first staff member. So I was now officially a boss. And it was about this time where I got her on to start supporting me. So she was managing one of my clients and she, would come to my house. We would both work at the kitchen table together. And I sort of realized that, okay, this is fun and all, but I really need to actually start taking this seriously, because as much as I was enjoying what I was doing, I was also feeling really sort of overwhelmed. Like, I felt like every day I was waking up and I was like excited for my day. I was loving it, but I was also just feeling really unsure what I should be focusing on, and that I was one client canceling away from, being a failure. Or if I had someone reject a proposal, I was like, what am I even doing? And I felt like I also had to check every single client's account every day to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And it just felt like I was trying to do so much, but nothing was really getting me progress past where I was at that time. So I realized that I had to sort of take things more seriously. And again, I had one of those moments where I sat down with myself and I was like, okay, you're at a bit of a crossroads. And I was like, I could either wrap this thing up because it's still really small. I only have a handful of clients. I've got one person on 4 hours a week, and that was contracted. And I was like, I could just wrap this up now, call it a fun success that I had. I played my hand at being a boss for a little bit, and I built a little brand. It was really fun. And then go and get a job somewhere in marketing where I had a boss and I had, consistent income and everything else, and I wasn't overwhelming myself trying to build a brand. Or I could take this seriously and actually build it into something that I really wanted to, have long term, and build into something that was bigger and that I could be really proud of. And when I realized that this was something that I did actually want to do, and I was like, no, I feel like I'm onto something. I feel like I've got something in my hands right now that I've built enough that I kind of know that there's something bigger here. So when I realized that that was how I felt, and that this was something that just had a lot of sort of drive behind it, I completely changed the way I was approaching it. I realized up until that point, I had been treating my business like a hobby. Like I just treated it like something that was fun, and I was having, fun doing it. And it was so cool calling myself a boss and having business cards and, going to events with a name tag that had a business on it. But I wasn't actually treating it like a business that I wanted to scale and grow, that I really wanted to be driven by success. So this was the game-changing moment. This was when I sat down and I was like, okay, what would make this a proper business? What would make this, something that's prominent, that people will take seriously and that I can actually grow? And what is needed to actually be able to grow it? So the first things that I really focused on were my processes and systems. Up until that point, I had just kind of fumbled my way through, every time I had a client, every month working with them, I was sort of navigating it, and I probably had little checklists and to-do lists sitting around, but I did not have a proper defined process or system, or, really clearly mapping out what it actually meant to partner with me as a brand. And that is one of the big things that I work with my students on now, is that you need to define what that feeling is for your clients to partner with you. They're not just partnering with a social media manager or a marketing agency. They're partnering with you specifically. So you need to define exactly what that looks and feels like. So that was one big process that I went through, figuring out exactly what programs that I wanted to use for it, figuring out what that flow was like. And then once I had that in place, it meant that I could actually optimize it as well. Because when you're just guessing your way through and you're fumbling your way through and you're kind of making it up on the spot to a degree, you can't actually optimize that in any way for yourself to be, faster pace and more effective for you, or for your clients to make it more powerful for them and easier for them to use. So by having that process in place and having that system backing my own growth, I was able to, look for opportunities to make it more streamlined. And that really, really helped me set myself up for growth. I then looked at who else I could hire on a team to fill some of the gaps that people were looking for. So because we were doing so well with these clients who were looking for, organic social media with me, they were then like, oh, I love what you're doing. Like, can you do paid ads, and can you do photo shoots, and can you do Google ads and everything else? And that was when I realized that I did need to shift from a freelancer into more of an agency model as well. At the time, I felt like that's what I had to do anyway. So I made the decision to sign a commercial lease and to set myself up a little bit more officially as a business and a brand. And one of the reasons that I did that is so that I would have a space as I started to hire a team that they could come to, but also because at the time I saw in the industry there was a real distrust with the marketing space and with social media, because of, the whole concept was like, it's this free thing that you post on and your business blows up and people can find you and thousands and millions of people will, all of a sudden buy from your brand. And a lot of business owners didn't understand it, and a lot of, long established business owners didn't understand it. So they'd been going for 40 years and all of a sudden there's this new platform coming in and it's the greatest thing alive. So I knew that people had distrust. They didn't understand it. They didn't really know how it would play a role in their business. So I decided to get an office space to just kind of counteract that a little bit. I was like, maybe if people feel like they can come into a physical location and meet with actual people, they will feel more confident in that decision to partner with us. At the time, that worked exceptionally well. Now there's so many freelancers, there's so many agencies around, there's so many doing so much in the marketing space that's not necessary. And that is a big part of why I now work from home. But at the time, I do feel like that was something that really put us at the forefront of the industry in the area. The other major thing that I did at the start was I threw a launch party. So this was for the exact same reasons. I wanted to really establish the brand, get people to see the name, see the people behind it, hear about what we were actually doing. So I pretty much poured the last of my money that I had from my car into a launch event, and it was really successful. I used the opportunity to connect with local business owners that I knew could actually have a real impact on my brand, either as clients or either as people talking about what I was doing. And they were all the people that were on the invite list. So off the back of that, we were pretty much booked out for consults, and we were able to fill our books really, really quickly. Once we had the books filled, I was then able to start to build the team as well. So it all sort of started to take a step up pretty much from the back of me taking everything more seriously. Like I said, taking it from looking at it as a hobby as like, oh, this is just fun and games, and I can just make moves that, feel comfortable to me, and I can call myself a boss, into really looking at what it meant to be a business, how I could get my name out there, what was holding us back, and how I could overcome those challenges, which is very, very different to today. If I was approaching business today, I would be taking very, very different avenues, but I had to look at it at that time as to what was going to work and what people's perceptions were and what was holding them back from partnering with us, and make the moves that were going to align with that and overcome that. So we were growing really successfully, which was super, super exciting. And I actually remember one of my first clients even, I was at the office and it was like 4 p.m. and this guy came in and he was like, hey, I'd heard about you guys. Someone who was at the launch party had told him that we existed and what street we were on. So he popped in and he was like, hey, can you pop together a super quick proposal for me? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, when do you need it? And he was like, oh, I need it by 8 a.m. tomorrow because I'm meeting with my business partners. Can you put something together for me? And I was like, it's 4 p.m., but I probably can. And he had said that he had proposals from these other really, really big successful agencies, but he loved working with local brands and he really wanted to see what we could do. So I remember staying up that night. I was on my couch. I had my laptop on my lap and it was like, 8 p.m. or something. And my eyes were burning. Like, they were on fire. I was so tired, so exhausted. I was still, off the back of launching the office and having the launch event and having endless consults and trying to build the team and everything else. But in my head, I was like, look, I know that we're probably too small for this guy, but I've told him I'd get something to him. So I need to get a proposal over. I just need to put something together. And I knew it needed to reflect what we had done because I was like, we've just had this launch party. The whole purpose was to get our name out there. This is someone who's heard about us. So even if we're not the right fit for him, maybe one of his contacts will be. So I sat there and I was like pushing myself to get this proposal together. And I had to keep going over it because I was so tired. I kept missing things. And I was like, I know that I probably will not get this, but I still need it to reflect the brand. And I think I sent it over at it was like 10:30 p.m., went straight to bed. And the next day I got a call from him at 9 a.m. and he was like, hey, just want to let you know, we went through the proposal. It is definitely much lighter than the other proposals that we've received, and there's much less explanation of the campaigns and things like that. But we love your approach. We love what you've done. So we want to go with you on the team. And I think at that moment, I was like, I sort of realized that where I thought we were in the industry and what I thought you needed to have to be successful, I thought we were years off that. I thought our only space that we could really play in was, sort of really small local brands. And getting that client made me see that that's just not the case in this industry. It is not about, how big you are is how big the clients you can get. It's about your creative angle and about the way you understand these platforms. And me and my team at that stage did understand them on a really, really deep level. And we were offering something that other brands weren't offering. So that client ended up being one of my biggest and longest term clients. I had him for the entire life of my agency, and when I sold the agency, he went with them as well. So I helped him launch I actually helped him launch 3 of his brands, all of them to be really, really successful launches. So that was one of those things that I honestly almost didn't go for because I thought that we were too small to even get it. But yeah, so glad that we did. And that was really one of the sort of changing moments for my mindset. I think that was the biggest thing. As much as it was amazing to have a bigger client and a client that, we're having great success with and running major campaigns for, I think the bigger part of that moment was my mindset shift, being like, oh, we can actually, play in a bigger area in this industry than I realized when I was launching. So over the next 4 years, I continued to grow the agency. We had major national and international clients. We were running really big major campaigns. I was launching highly recognized brands into the Australian market and overall just built a really good name for ourselves in the space. I had a team of about 8 working under me, as well as about 12 contractors. And we ended up moving from our baby little first office that I absolutely adored into a beachside office and, sort of established ourselves as a step up from where we started. So at this stage, it'd been 5 years since I made the decision to quit that first agency role. I'd been working for myself the entire time, built up this agency, built up a brand, built up a position in an industry that was huge. And it took so much sacrifice and so much navigation through so many things that I didn't understand and, had no experience in at the time, but really pushed myself to, navigate it and figure it out. And after those 5 years, this was the end of 2022, I had this was the start of 2022. I'd set the goals for the year with the team. And I had sat down and I was like, cool, this is what we're going to do. These are the campaigns we're going to run. These are the clients we're going to have. This is our social following, blah, 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 all of the big things that I wanted us to achieve that year. And I remember it got to like March, April, and we were achieving all of these big goals. We were literally achieving everything that we'd set out to achieve. And I looked around and I had this moment where I was like, I actually don't know if I am building something that I want to build right now. I just let myself kind of ponder on that idea. Like it kind of scared me when I had that thought of like, is this a business that I actually want? Because I just sacrificed 5 years of my life building something big and, throwing myself at it, being there until 10 p.m. at night, doing all of the big stuff that goes into building a brand from scratch. And to look around after 5 years and kind of have this feeling of like, I don't actually know if it's for me was really scary. So I think I kind of like avoided the thought for a little while, but after a few weeks of it really kind of showing me that it was something that I had to dive into, had to think about a little bit more, I gave myself a moment where I was like, okay, just sit down and think about what it would look like to sell this business, because I knew I'd set it up. I'd put in all the hard yards to get this really well established, really well set up and running, and a great brand name and great client list, great team, everything else. So I was like, this is not something that I would shut down in any capacity. And I knew that the right person would be able to run it if I handed it over to them. So I just sat with that idea for a second and was like, what would it look like to sell this business? What would that mean for me? What would that mean for the team? What would it mean for the clients? What would it mean for everyone who's involved? And I realized that there honestly was not really another option. It was a move that I had to make. And the biggest driver behind that was that I knew that it was something that I wasn't feeling as aligned with anymore. And it wasn't just the current situation. It was also the future steps of that brand. And I knew that staying involved in that role, because that role of being the head of a team and the head of a brand is so, so important. There are so many people relying on you and relying on your vision and your drive. And I knew it wasn't fair for me to stay in that space when I had a whole team relying on me. I had a pool of major clients relying on me, and I had so many people involved in the brand that were looking to me for direction. So if I wasn't feeling it, it just wasn't fair to remain in that position. So there was two kind of things that brought me to that moment. I think firstly, there was that I had built a business that was someone else's dream, essentially. I had made every business decision up until that point based on what I thought I was meant to do. I thought that, when you hit a certain capacity, the next thing you do is hire people. And I thought that you had to chase the biggest contracts and the biggest brands that you could, and that you had to, make the big moves and get the big office and do all the things that everyone says is what success is. So I had done all of those moves and then looked around and was like, this is not a business that I actually love and I love being in. And the other driver behind deciding to sell was that I loved training, and I'd always loved training, and I'd had the academy actually set up kind of on the side of the agency for a little while. And I had worked with so many brands, I'd run so many workshops, done so many podcasts, things like that, that I was training people in, and it really lit me up. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was something that if I could do more of in the agency, I definitely would have. But when you're running a team and you're running a business and you're doing everything else that's involved in building a brand to that level, I never really had time to do it. And I also could see in the industry, there was a really big draw for people to do training over just offering the services. I think people had started to understand that if they had the right skills and understanding, they actually could do a lot of this themselves. So the people who were outsourcing were more so doing it to save time, or because they didn't enjoy doing it themselves. So that really was a big draw card for training. So when I looked at all of that, I was like, okay, for my clients and my team and for everyone else, this decision makes sense. And then for me as a person and where I want to go with my career and where I want to apply my energy and apply my skill set is in training, I just kind of realized that there was a path already kind of carved out for me. It was to sell the business and go into training. So I sold the business in September, October 2022, somewhere around there. And I gave myself 3 months to completely tap out from live. I was so burnt out by this point. I just needed, a rest and a break. And then the start of 2023 was where I really started to sort of focus more on the academy, start to build it up a little bit more. And initially, I was focusing on working with business owners. I had always worked with business owners in the agency. So when I sold the agency and started in the academy, that was really my initial focus. But I also I spent 2023 basically kind of being open to the idea of seeing where the business wanted to go as well, seeing what opportunities came up. And it wasn't that I had no business goal or that it was going to evolve in whatever direction. I wasn't going to have a say in it. I knew exactly, how I wanted to feel, and I had enough knowledge and experience to make the right decisions. But I also just wanted to kind of open it up a little bit and see what would come from just being a little bit flexible in the opportunities that came from, just launching the academy, talking about it, telling people what I was doing, and seeing what offerings kind of came from that. So when I first started training business owners, I worked with a whole heap that had come to me from events and come to me from the media surrounding the sale of the agency. But then from that as well, I actually got approached by 3 separate social media managers. So they came to me and were like, hey, I am starting my own social media business. One of them had just finished her uni degree. One of them had been working in marketing for a little while. And the other one was just literally launching her business at the time. All 3 of them came to me and were like, hey, we saw what you did with the agency. We saw the way that you built it. Is there any chance you could give me some insight? Like, do you do coaching? Do you do training? Do you have a course? Like, what is it that you can sort of do with me? And initially I was like, I don't know, I kind of assumed that they would have a fairly good setup and that they would kind of know a lot about how to run the business and, so how to drive clients and how to have their systems and processes and everything else. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just have a chat to you and see what value I can give. Like, let's just grab a coffee and I can kind of go through it with you. And looking at these business setups and where these girls were at, I realized so quickly, I was like, oh my gosh, every single little thing that I did in my agency in terms of figuring out the best way to approach everything and figuring out the processes and systems and backends and how to get clients and how to talk to them and how to pitch them was the missing pieces of the puzzle for these girls that I was talking to. So from that, I really recognized that I had a lot to give in that space, and what I was really passionate about and what I was really excited by was actually what people were looking for as well. So it kind of solidified my decision to go into training because I realized I actually had a lot more to offer in that space than I even had, considered when I first went into it. So when I had these social media managers approach me, I really realized that so much of that I had learned in my journey of, launching freelance business, defining it as an actual business and brand, building that into an agency, growing that agency to the level that I had was so many big lessons that I could now share with people in that community. And I could really support them from that stage that I was in at the start where I was absolutely fumbling my way through. I had no idea what I was doing. I was messy. I was overwhelmed. I was burning myself out, I actually found that what I learned from that is now what I can offer to people in that same position. And I can save them all of the stress and overwhelm and time that I wasted, trying to figure that out for myself and literally give that sort of game plan to them. So it actually gave me so much more purpose in the academy and so much more value that I could offer. And I realized that everything that I had learned and everything that I was kind of walking away from the agency with was actually what people were looking for and was actually what I could show up with and add value for. So this allowed me to bridge the gap between what business owners want and showing them that their role as a social media manager can go beyond just posting on the account. It's less about being a social media manager and more about the experience that they're creating for their clients and the life that they're building for themselves. The social media space is such a powerful industry with so much opportunity, and I love being able to work with my clients to help them take advantage of everything that it has to offer. I hope this series will give you some insight into what that means for you and how you can become a really powerful, successful social media manager. I think it's easy to see people doing well online and wonder if you're missing something, but 9 times out of 10, what you're missing is time, commitment, and consistency. So hopefully having some background on me and my chapters and all the random experiences and moments that brought me here will help you understand that. I never had a plan from the get-go, and a lot of what I do is just trusting myself, or at the bare minimum making a decision and trusting that decision. I hope you enjoyed my first episode. Like I said, this was just to give a little bit of background into who I am and my story, but as of the next episode, I will be really focusing on giving you value. So I will be getting in a friend of mine who is a highly successful social media manager, Lily Gillo, and I will be dropping a new episode every second week for 10 weeks. I would love to hear from you if you've enjoyed this episode, so shoot me a DM on Instagram to let me know everything that you've thought of today's episode at Dash Academy with a _. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you on the next episode.